Welcome back to Zag Talk. It's been a little while that you've heard my voice, and only a little bit more recent that you've heard Carson and Brian. Unfortunately, Brian's not with us, not in general, but just today. So it's just Carson and I recording, putting out an episode this week. We got Pepperdine on Wednesday. This will probably be coming out post the Pepperdine game, but we really don't need to talk about that matchup too much anyways. Then we got Santa Clara on Saturday, a much different game than the Pepperdine game, most likely. So we're going to talk through in this episode a little bit of a recent game recap, talk through some of the trends that have been developing on the Gonzaga team related to Chet, our defense, shooting, talking about just how the team's been performing more recently. We'll walk through some of the WCC and general college basketball news that's been going around. We'll touch on recruiting just a little bit, and then we'll talk about Santa Clara. So stick with us through this episode, and we'll see you in a second. So talking through our recent couple of games, biggest game that we've had so far in non-conference in terms of rankings, we had our St. Mary's game on Saturday against number 22 ranked St. Mary's at home. Carson, what are your main takeaways from that big game over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good test for us. Obviously, we still came away with a 16-point win, but just having a close-ish game finally for the first time since probably, I don't know, what was it, Texas Tech, I guess, 14-point win, but, close throughout, I guess, more so than in conference. So I think it was good to play a different style, a team that kind of gets us out of what we do in the half court, forces us to play half court offense, which, we haven't had to do a ton of or rely on a bunch so far in conference. So good to get back into that. We kind of got our rhythm back to our offense, our half court offense after that rough stretch of Duke, Tarleton State, and Alabama where things just weren't clicking. So it's a good test there. Obviously, Chet, scoring wise didn't do, as crazy this game, but he's just been on fire as of late and kind of some of the recent trends, his 3-point shooting, as we kind of expected at the beginning of the year, thought he had the potential to shoot in the 40s, and he's shooting 46.6% from three now on the season. And that number over the last 5 or 6 games has just been insane. North of 50%. Might even be north of 60%. So he's just continued to flourish and, get comfortable in the offense. Obviously, some of the competition, not what you'll be seeing later in the tournament, but at the same time, he's playing against guys even at San Diego, for example, that, were power conference big guys last year. And St. Mary's, has a solid big as well. So he's just working through it. He's getting comfortable in the offense. He's found his shot. So I think that's just been a big takeaway from that game and just the last few games in general, since it's been a while since we've talked. And then defense and shooting have really turned around for us. I know there were concerns at the beginning of the year in regards to our 3-point shooting, and that looks a little silly now. I know we talked about it early, saying we weren't super concerned about it because guys had the ability to. It was just a matter of finding shots, getting in the rhythm of offense, and now that's really taken hold. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure we didn't get double-digit threes against St. Mary's, but that would make it 8 out of the last 13 games where we've made double-digit threes, which is pretty crazy. And we're currently 13th in the country in 3-point shooting percentage in KenPom, which would be the 4th highest finish for a Gonzaga team in the KenPom era going back to 2002. So this team can really shoot the ball. They're not afraid to shoot the ball. We're shooting more threes as a percentage of our total shots than we did even last year and in quite a while. So that's been great to see. I think it's another aspect of the game for us that's going to be huge come March, a little more balance. And then also defense, we're back in the top 10, currently 7th in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency, which is the highest since right after the UCLA game and the second highest on the season. We were number 4 heading into the Texas game. So since we played one game, this is the highest we've been, and we're really trending in the right direction there. And that's been bolstered by Chet inside and just overall really solid defense on the perimeter as well. Our 3-point defense and 2-point defense have been stellar. We lead the country in both effective field goal percentage for offense and defense, which if the season ended today, that's never happened before. The closest it was Georgetown back when Roy Hibbert was there, when they finished first and third. And then also for 3-point percentage, we're 16th in the country defensively. So pretty good. We're looking good. We're trending in the right direction. Now, we got a few more tests coming up. Like we said, Santa Clara on Saturday, who's been a sneaky good team this year, and then San Francisco and St. Mary's to finish it out. So hopefully we keep moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think, speaking to the St. Mary's game, I don't think we got lucky, but I'm looking at it now, and St. Mary's shot 39% from the field. They shot 30% from three. They took 17 threes. They only hit 5. I'm not saying, and part of that's due to our defense and just how good this defense is. I mean, there were multiple times where St. Mary's got late in the shot clock and threw up a really, really bad shot. So I think that's all credit to our defense. But at the same time, they hit a couple more shots. That game's even closer than 16. So I think it was a great game from St. Mary's perspective. Definitely could have been closer. Maybe great game's an overstatement, but I think they did pretty well for a game in Spokane. And to, hold it to 16, it ballooned up to 21 and they got it back down to, I believe, 9
to 8 with about a little under 3 minutes left.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it definitely ballooned up in the middle and they got it back close. But good to see for St. Mary's, good to see for keeping potentially the 4 Bid WCC alive. We'll get to that in a little bit, but yeah, overall great game for the Zags at home with Jalen Suggs in the crowd. So just cool to see.
Yeah, and if you're looking at KenPom too, we did exactly what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to win by 16, and we won by 16. I think one thing with St. Mary's, I kind of referenced it a little bit with just the way that they play. They slow things down. They make you run offense in the half court. And so a lot of times with them, we've seen in the past where that 8-point or 10-point lead is a lot bigger in reality than what it seems like when we're used to normal games where 8 or 10 points that could be made up in a minute or 2 minutes. I think Sean Farnham at the end of the game when Strother had hit a 3 to put us up 12 and there's still like a minute 50 or a minute 40 left and they weren't fouling, and the guy was like, oh wow, I guess they're giving up, like they're not gonna foul, and Farnham was like, yeah, no, it takes them 30 seconds to run their offense, like they're not going to get enough shots up to make this a game. So I think that's part of it. But St. Mary's did make a little run at the end. I think we got a little stagnant in our half court offense after, that lead ballooned up to 21 points and we had kind of just enforced our will with Timmy inside and Nemhard posting up. So I think we got out of our flow that we had been kind of using previously, that we'd kind of got to at the end of the first half when we pushed that lead out to 13. So there's some of that. I don't know if maybe it had stayed closer, we would have ran better offense in the second half of the second half. But, all in all, that's a great win against a top 25 KenPom team. And it's a Q1 win, and we'll take that every day.
Yeah, the only starter who looked a little off against St. Mary's was Russier Bolton, but he was also coming off probably one of his best games of the season on that Thursday game. So no real concerns there for an off night for him. I think one of the things that stood out to me as we've gotten into WCC play, and I think it stands out every year when it comes to WCC play, is the back end of the bench guys that are actually getting rotation minutes, right? So Salas and Hickman are really this season, those two guys. And I think it's been awesome to see how electric, especially Salas has been recently, because that becomes so important when you get into conference tournament, when you get into March Madness, because, foul trouble happens, Rasier, gets into foul trouble, Hickman gets into foul trouble, whatever. And you have somebody like Salas, who's your 8th man, who's able to step up and make explosive plays, super athletic, great defender. I think that's going to pay dividends. I think I throw him in the X factor category if we need him, really in any of these March Madness games.
Yeah, it's been great to see. I mean, obviously we knew these freshmen, just like Chet, were going to progress throughout the season and get more minutes in conference. I think what we've seen from Hickman is just more of the same. He's really solid. He's consistent. He's not going to go out there and get you 20 points. Obviously, he had a pretty big scoring game against Alabama. We kind of needed it, but he's not going to go out and take any crazy shots. He's really in control. Like if Nemhard needed to go out, you'd be comfortable with him taking care of the ball, which is great to have off the bench. Salas is, yeah, like you said, a little bit more of the spark plug, a little more electric. He's still figuring out his game offensively, although he has shown an improved jump shot, both in form and being able to knock it down. So promising to see. He's been better defensively as well. Figuring out where to take his chances, I think is what had gotten him yanked off the court a few times where, he was either lost on assignment. We know he's a great defender skill wise, but just, figuring out where to fit into the team defense. And so he's been good getting those minutes. And I think both of those guys are going to be huge down the stretch. And even just looking at our bench minutes this year relative to last year, like we're close to 30% of minutes coming from the bench, whereas last year we were under 25%. So definitely a lot more help off the bench this year. And I think with the St. Mary's game, that kind of worried me a little bit that I saw going back towards, our rough stretch of those 3 games back in late November, early December was, when Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren and Andrew Nemhard aren't scoring or aren't making their shots, aren't getting their looks, like who else is there to step up? Obviously, Bolton wasn't his best game here, but he's shown so far this season, especially as of late, that he's capable of scoring there. And then Strother, I really liked at the end of the game how he was able to come up and hit 2 big threes to kind of put the game away. So again, just taking steps every time we're out there in these more competitive games. I think that's huge as we head into March, because those game plans are going to be there to shut down Timme and body up Chet and try to take Nemhard out of what he likes to do. So we have so many weapons, and we've seen it. If you look at our scoring averages too, I think we have 5 guys in double digits, and Anton's right there, and Hickman can score if he needs to, and Salas can give you a couple points off the bench as well.
Well, let's talk about the rest of the WCC. BYU struggling in the back half of the season, partially due to injuries. I think they've had one of injuries and sickness. They've had a ton of lineup combinations. In fact, cool little statistic for them. They had a starting lineup, I believe, last week on either their Thursday or their Saturday game. They started 4 African-American players, which they've never done before. And they also started all 5 players were not Mormons. All 5 starters were not Mormons. So in this, that was the same game. So just goes to show how differing their lineup has been this year. Their starting lineup has been. But they dropped 4 in a row before finally eking out a win last week, and has really struggled, and I think really fallen off, has slid solidly into that 4th spot for the Four Bid WCC wish list, although could even be potentially passed by one of the other teams, Santa Clara, that we'll talk about in a second. But what have you seen from BYU? What do they have to do to potentially eke out a spot in March Madness?
Realistically, they need to win out. They got to go to St. Mary's and play on Saturday, which is going to be really tough. I don't see them winning that game, but they really do need to win that. They're right now in a lot of brackets, the last team in, or in that last 4 in, or first 4 out. So they need to win badly, especially following up, it was the first 4-game losing streak in, I think, 5 or 6 years for them. And then, Loyola Marymount took them to overtime, and then they beat Pepperdine by 6. So they're not playing great basketball. Got to beat St. Mary's, and then got to beat LMU and Pepperdine again to close out the season. Luckily, they've had a pretty easy schedule after they last played Gonzaga. And then they have to win in the tournament too. And the tough thing for them is, you start looking at where everybody is. And you mentioned Santa Clara, who has a chance to potentially be the number 2 seed in the conference, even though they really don't have a chance to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large bid. And we can touch on that in a second. But you also have San Francisco and St. Mary's, who would have to pick up a couple losses outside of, playing against each other for BYU to hop into a top 3 seed. So you're looking at BYU potentially having to play in the second round. They'd have to play there, and then they'd have to play in the quarterfinals against San Francisco or a Santa Clara, or potentially St. Mary's, but that scenario is more unlikely. So teams that they've lost to this year and are playing a lot better than they are right now, and then they need to win that, and then they need to probably beat Gonzaga. Maybe not. If they made it somehow, if the bracket lined up to where they made the championship game and didn't have to play Gonzaga until the championship, I think that would be decent for them. But I mean, things have to go pretty much perfect for them from here on out, I think, especially as you get some of these power conference schools like, or Power Six schools like Memphis, and then you throw in an American Athletic Conference team, or I mean, American Athletic Conference is Memphis, Michigan from the Big Ten. Teams like that, that's where it starts getting a little dicey for these third and fourth WCC teams, depending on how strong they finish the season. In terms of what they're struggling with, it's a lot. I think when they first lost, blanking on his name, the big guy who was actually there this year, Baxter.
Gavin Baxter.
When they lost him, and obviously they didn't have their other big all year, but that news came out. I think at first they still did decent. They won some decent games. I think he was out by the time they played Utah State and Missouri State. But I think what started happening is teams started being able to game plan for them a little bit. They weren't sure how they looked schematically without their big guys, how much they were going to rely on their guards and who they were going to rely on, what that looks like. And obviously they've shifted their lineup quite a few times this year. But I think teams finally started figuring out what they were doing without their bigs and how to control for that and how to take advantage of it. And I think that's really started to hurt them quite a bit here down the stretch, especially as you start playing these teams a second time on the year. So it's not looking good for them, but it is a cool thing for them. And I think probably a good sign for BYU as they start moving towards the Big 12, that they're able to recruit guys who are good enough to start there that are outside of the Mormon church. Just because, I think the competitiveness only goes so far if you're, casting such a small net. But other than that, it's another disappointing year for them in the WCC.
Yeah, and I think the only thing of note that maybe they can ride to a couple wins here in the back half of the season is that Alex Barcel looks a lot better outside of the loss to Gonzaga, where he only had 9 points and he was 1 of 7 from 3. He had 19 and 25 the 2 games before that. He only had 12 in their overtime loss, but he also went off for 33 on 9 of 10 from 3 in their win over Pepperdine. So literally dragged them to a win over Pepperdine. You can't do that, but if he maybe gets some support, you have the ability to win some games in the back half of the season that are really going to be really important for them to have a shot.
Yep. If I had to guess, I think they're probably the 5 seed, and I think they're out in the quarterfinals. That's my guess right now.
Yep.
But in other news, the teams that have kind of stepped in, well, first, it was a rough week for the Four Bid WCC last week. St. Mary's, moved up to number 22, then lost to Santa Clara, which Santa Clara has been on fire, has been playing really well, and, outside of a couple really bad losses in late November, early December, they would potentially be looking at being another tournament at large team coming from the WCC. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case unless they somehow make a crazy run and beat Gonzaga at Gonzaga. It seems really, really unlikely. But they've put together a nice season. But St. Mary's lost that and then lost to Gonzaga. I still think that they're going to be solidly in, even if they lose to Gonzaga again, and even if they drop the one to San Francisco this weekend. They're currently listed as a 7 seed on Bracket Matrix, so pretty solidly in. San Francisco, though, turned around and lost to, after beating BYU at BYU, had a close game against Portland, and then played Portland again at home and lost to them. So that's a pretty rough one. Thought that might be it for them. They've rebounded nicely with a win against Santa Clara. I think at Santa Clara, that was really, really big for them. They really needed that one. And so now, I think they're in a decent spot. They still have to take care of business here. They have a fairly not light schedule, but they play Pacific, St. Mary's, Gonzaga, and then San Diego. So I think that they probably need to win the game against St. Mary's to feel comfortable about where they are going into the conference tournament, and then obviously not have any slip ups there. But I think it's still plausible for for San Francisco to get in, and I think St. Mary's is pretty solidly in unless they just absolutely fall apart, which I don't see happening. So, fingers crossed for a 3-bid WCC, and hopefully Santa Clara can get into the NIT and make some noise there, because they've been one of the hottest teams in the conference and in all of mid-major basketball over the last month or so. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think we're looking down the barrel of most likely a 2 to 3 bid WCC with BYU and Santa Clara getting some consideration, but eventually not ending up in the tournament. And hopefully can make some noise elsewhere in other tournaments, and we can end up with 5 teams that represent well the WCC this year, which has been better off than we've been the last 10 years. So I'll take it. I'll take it. I think the only other piece more recently when we're talking about like WCC is we're back into the point of the season where Gonzaga rises to number 1 again, and we get picked on for having a cupcake conference. And, I think there's validity to the argument, obviously, that Gonzaga is not tested in conference nearly as much as other schools may be in some of the Power 5 conferences. However, I do think the WCC, at least the top half of the WCC, is slowly getting better and better each year. Obviously, this year, Gonzaga not really tested by many of those teams, but I do think those teams are testing each other and slowly building up the overall resume of, again, the top half of the WCC. Top half to 2/3 of the WCC. And Auburn fans don't know how to handle any level of success, and it's really annoying.
Yeah, I mean, our strength of schedule, I was comparing last year's team to this year's team, and our strength of schedule this year is significantly worse, which when you actually start looking at it, makes a lot of sense. Like, we had a negative adjusted efficiency margin rating for our opponents in the non-conference this year, where it was like a +11 last year. So really strong last year. But if you look at it, it's like we had half of our really, really bad games wiped out that were scheduled by our COVID pause. And then we played, because of the way scheduling was, I mean, most of our non-conference was just really good teams. Like, you had the West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Kansas, Auburn was in there, but they weren't very good last year. So but we still played a lot of really good teams. And that was mostly what our non-conference consisted of. So worse this year, but a lot of that's just because you throw a lot of those junk games in there too. But look, I mean, we've played some of the best teams in the country. We've, Alabama played really poorly again, still had a chance to win it, lost by 9. Duke, that was anybody's game. And then obviously beat Texas Tech, who's going to be a top 3 or 4 seed. And then, beat Texas very handedly, and UCLA. So it is what it is. They're going to talk about it forever. It's never going to not be a conversation. But we'll be all right, like we are every year. If your gauge for success is only winning a national championship, then it's a sad life for you. I hope we get there. But yeah, not a lot of happy people in the world if that's, how you're judging a program's success. But I will say one other note, just NCAA tournament talk. We do have the early bracket reveal, the top 16 seeds on Saturday. I believe it's Saturday morning, so we should know that before the Santa Clara game. It's a week later this year because the Super Bowl is a week later. So it's only 3 weeks before Selection Sunday. So really shouldn't be much change from this until then, unless, certain teams really fall apart. But big question with that is going to be who gets the number 1 overall seed. Gonzaga and Auburn both have really good cases for it. We're both 7-2 in Q1 games. As of right now, I think Gonzaga actually has more Q1 opportunities before the end of the regular season. But Auburn, will probably end up with about the same or a little bit more after conference tournaments. But yeah, both 7-2. They do have the edge on us in Q2 games. They're 6-0. We're 2-0. I think we'll also add another Q2 with Santa Clara this weekend. So you look at what those Q1 games are made out of. I think our wins probably edge theirs out if you're really looking at the teams, and especially at where they are now relative to I think Auburn lost to UConn in overtime and lost to Arkansas, who's unranked. Our losses are better. and our wins are, both have some really solid wins. They beat Kentucky. We beat UCLA and Texas Tech. They have Tennessee coming up soon. I'm trying to think who else they beat. They have some good mid-major wins. They beat Murray State and Loyola Chicago.
They beat Bama twice.
Bama twice. Yep, that's the big one. That's that. Like, if you're going to make an argument on head-to-heads, that's kind of the one that gives them the advantage there. Obviously, different team than what we played back in November, December.
You mean Superman JD Davidson hitting way outside his number of threes that he's been hitting? I think he went like 0 for something for games after that too.
Yeah. So I think the big thing, I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter. I'd be perfectly fine if we end up being the number 2 overall, which I think is probably realistic considering what Auburn has left. Fewer Q1 games in the regular season, but with the SEC tournament, I think that maybe gives them the little edge at the end. But that doesn't matter for us because, we just want the 1 seed in the West. The other, I think, biggest thing to look at is going to be where Arizona is on the seed line. Right now, Bracket Matrix has them as the 3rd number 1, which would be great for us because they would be not in our bracket. Not that I don't think that we would beat them. The idea of playing against a guy that knows pretty much all of your personnel, like the back of his hand, and your entire playbook, not really the, advantage you're looking for or disadvantage you're looking for in an Elite Eight game. Could be a Final Four, but that's what we're looking for. And I think they should be number 1 seed come Saturday. But just something to watch for with Arizona the rest of the way and how they handle the Pac-12 slate the rest of the way.
Let's hop over to recruiting just super quick. Obviously, Dusty Stromer and Jared McCain both in the house for the St. Mary's matchup. So that was great to see them on the sidelines. Got lots of chants from the student section as well. So hopefully made a good impression on those two. Hoping to lock those guys up pretty quickly here. And then the other big one is Anthony Black. Just seeing more and more that, he's the top target or the top number 1 ranked unsigned recruit for 2022. He is missing and has missed the rest of the high school season because the Texas Athletic Board sucks. But hoping to really lock that one in here shortly. All signs point to Gonzaga locking Anthony Black up for next year, but not official yet. And then looking forward to 2023 as well, Mookie Cook is really shooting up charts, and Gonzaga is still very heavily involved there. In fact, I think he's going to be in town for the Santa Clara game on Saturday. So it'll be great to see him in the building and hopefully make a good impression on him as well. I think the other thing of note for recruiting that I took away was, seeing Jalen Suggs in the student section and in Spokane for games last week. Rumors he's going to be back in Spokane at some point here in the near future, along with potentially some other recent Zag grads that are in the NBA, I think is just huge. It's understated. Obviously, a lot of players love repping the schools that they went to, but to see somebody like Jalen back in McCarthy Athletic Center on the court in the student section, having a blast, and you just see how much love he has for Gonzaga. And I think that's that extra 3 or 5% that it takes to push some of those top recruits over the edge to pick a school like Gonzaga over another school, is just how tight knit that community is and how much guys that are going to the NBA love playing for multiple years or for 1 year at a school like Gonzaga. It's not just a one and done school. It can be a long-term school. So you get, mid-level prospects who are going to be around for a couple of years. And it's also a one and done school. So you get guys like Chet and Jalen coming in and just, loving that atmosphere. And it was also cool to see Jalen be able to experience that atmosphere, because I was reminded he didn't get a chance to really ever have that when he was at Gonzaga. There were no student sections. So cool for him to have that experience too.
Yeah, and I think they did confirm that he is going to be back next week. And it was in one of their videos where he mentioned coming back next weekend or something. So I think he just, they were playing in Salt Lake City the next day. And so he made a quick trip, which was kind of cool. He's going to do it back-to-back weekends. And yeah, I would think with the All-Star break that you're going to get at least the guys from last year, like Kispert and Ayayi, back over, get their, senior night that they didn't get to have last year, and get a send-off there. Yeah, other than that, I don't think anything's been confirmed. I just know that, there had been some murmurs about getting Mookie Cook on campus this year and that was going to happen. And, Saturday is our last home game of the year. So you would think that would be the time to do it. And it'd be a great time, like you mentioned, with having Jalen, a recent one and done there. And then some other guys who are just, great zags. So I think that'd be good to show the culture and, the love that they have from the crowd and everything. So, and it's going to be a bigger game than I think it was expected to be originally. So something to keep an eye out for. It sounds like the visit for Dusty and Jared went well. Jared McCain is obviously the higher rated out of the two. But he's been kind of known that Gonzaga and Duke are his dream schools. So hopefully we can beat out Duke there. And I think Dusty, if he were to decide to become a Zag, I think that helps out as well too, just with their connections. So fingers crossed on those ones.
It'd be interesting to see if we can get a starting lineup of ex-Zags, ex-NBA Zags, or ex-Zags in the NBA this weekend. You got the opportunity with Jalen, Joel, Corey, Rui, or Clark, or Tilly. You could get a starting five together.
Kelly Olynyk. I don't know if you already mentioned him. Yeah. I mean, it'd be really cool if they got more than just, the guys from last year back. I feel like they're going to do something extra for those guys. But, Rui's made the trip back before. I don't know if Brandon Clark has, but we know he's still a big Zag. And Tilly, I don't think he's been back since the canceled season. Like, he hasn't really had a chance to, I guess he had a senior night, but, didn't have the tournament and everything. So could end up having a bunch of them back, and that would be really cool. Sabonis is, for the first time in the last couple of years, that isn't playing in the All-Star game. So, and he's a lot closer to Spokane now, out in Sacramento. So he can make an appearance.
It'd be cool to see just a lot of Zags in the house. Bummer it doesn't line up with guys like Jared and Dusty also being in the building. That would have been even cooler. But glad to just see them be in the building as Jalen Suggs is in the building. I think they overlapped, right? They both there on Saturday?
He was there for...
Oh, was he there for the Thursday game?
He was there for the Thursday game.
That's right. That's right.
But from what I've heard, it was a great visit regardless. So exactly. That helps when St. Mary's is in the house. So...
Right. Yeah. Student section. I heard mixed reports. Like, I saw some things that the student section was quiet. I know they were not mic'd up correctly for the game itself. So they definitely sounded quiet on TV, but I saw mixed reports in terms of folks that were in the building on whether or not they were loud. Some people said they were great. Other people said they were quiet. So, who knows? Yeah.
I mean, it sounded like they sounded loud and the, big plays and big runs, but I think where it makes sense that maybe the mic wasn't picking it up well, or just something with the broadcast, which we've had a few times this year, that when there wasn't anything crazy happening, that it sounded just in general pretty quiet in there. It reminded me of like the Mariners this year when we were in the last few games of the season and wasn't going well on like the Friday night game. And it was just like this nervous, like murmur across the whole crowd. And I was like, that's never happened at a Gonzaga game that I've been to, like at the Kennel, especially not when we're up the way we were. So I kind of figured it was just, a mix of probably some dead times, but also just not being mic'd up very well.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, we can skip over the Pepperdine game that, as of we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, is going to happen on Wednesday afternoon, not Thursday. So that's a weird scheduling change there, or scheduling difference from our normal Thursday-Saturday cadence. But then we got Santa Clara on Saturday. So I'll give quick little highlights, and then we can talk about what we might expect out of that matchup. But Santa Clara is led by their junior forward, Jalen Williams, who is leading the team in both points with 18 a game and assists with around 4. Vrancic is back from his injury, and then was also, I think he but played less minutes in a couple of games due to illness as well. He's been hot since his back-to-back single-digit games that he had in scoring-wise in mid-January. Since then, he's averaging about 17 points, almost 6 rebounds, and 2.5 assists a game. So those are the two big stat guys. From a team makeup perspective, they do have a little more height than some other WCC teams have, with Vrancic at 6'9". I'm butchering the shit out of that name. At 6'9". Vrancic? Yeah, sure. Dylan's butchering corner.
Can't be worse than the dude from West Virginia last year.
Oh, yeah.
You pronounced it Osa Bihoan.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That guy. Keyshawn Justice at 6'7", and then they got two bigger guys. Parker Braun starting at 6'10", and then Jaden Bediako, who's not playing a ton of minutes, but he's also 6'10", is supported off the bench. They don't use it as well as they maybe could. They are 145th, about middle of the pack in country in rebounds a game. However, they are around 40th in defensive rebounds a game. So do turn it up a little bit on the defensive end. Don't let teams get a ton of second chance points. And then from a KenPom perspective, 41st in adjusted O and 128th in adjusted D. So a lot better on offense last time we played them. They did put up 83. Unfortunately, they let us score 115. So that's not a winning recipe for Santa Clara. But what are you expecting in terms of gameplay on Saturday?
I mean, I don't think it's going to be a close game again. I know KenPom has it at 21. I think they just struggle with the depth of our big guys and keeping up with that, for the full game. I know they put up 83 last time. It was our sixth worst defensive game of the season. Still not terrible. We were giving up about 0.92 points per possession. So still well under the 1 point per possession mark. But it is worse than our adjusted defensive efficiency, which is I think at 88 now on the season. So I don't know. I mean, they're going to have to get a really big game out of Vrankic, both offensively and defensively. And then obviously, Williams is going to have to do a lot. He's really going to have to carry the load for them. But I still don't see the depth. Who is it? They have Pipes too, who's, he's had some big games. I don't know. I mean, they could give us a run. I'd be fine with it if they did. I think the biggest thing for us, for Santa Clara the rest of the way, since, they're not going to make the tournament most likely unless a miracle happens, but they're flirting with the edge of the Q1 territory. They're currently 72nd in net. So if they just jump up to 70, or better, which they've been in and out of, that gives us another Q1 game on the year, which could be big when it comes to the final seed list. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think we're going to beat them by 32 again. Although that was on the road, but I would be fine with us scoring about 90 and seeing our defense lock down a little bit as we get to play against a team that's a little bit more skilled offensively. Kind of a reverse of what we saw with St. Mary's last weekend. So yeah, not expecting much in terms of an exciting game per se, but I think it'll be entertaining at least.
Yeah, it hopefully, for Santa Clara's sake and for our end of season seeding sake, is a decent game. And like you said, last game in the kennel for the season, so that'll be a fun one as well. So senior night for a couple of guys.
Yeah,
I said that, and then I realized.
I would assume Regier is gonna. He's listed as a senior. I think they're treating it as his senior year, so I think he would get it. Is Nemhard listed as a senior? I know he has eligibility left. That's the weird thing with the whole extra year. But I believe he has. I think he's listed as a senior, but I think he has at least another year left because he played the 2 at Florida and then last year and this year, so it's his 4th year playing. But he does have the COVID year if he wanted to. I don't think there's anybody else.
I think it's just
Matt
those
Lang,
two.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure he's a junior. I'm looking right now, though.
Wow. Okay. Not a big one, but that's where you'll probably see then. I was thinking about it earlier today on if they're actually because I could see them having, Corey and Joel and maybe even Suggs walk down the aisles in the, through the kennel club like they do normally. And I was like, well, would they do that? Because it does kind of take away from, the current guys. But at the same time, I think that the way the culture is with the team and the respect they have for those guys, that I don't think there would be an issue with them doing that. And that would be a cool experience for everybody involved. So.
Yeah, so our 4 listed seniors, although technically Rasir and Andrew are listed as seniors, I believe they both have a year of eligibility left. Because of
they
COVID.
Both do because of COVID.
Yeah. And then I stand corrected. Graves and Lang are both seniors. So those two for Graves, sure will be walking
Graves
down.
Was a senior. I feel like he's only been here for a couple of years.
But the question is, like, do they come back next year? Because they also have another year of eligibility, and like they both are. I mean, obviously they're not playing in big games, but those two in our Loskis are like playing in most of our conference games.
Yeah, they get like 5 or 6 minutes a game.
Yeah, if I'm Graves and Lang, I come back for another year. I go get my master's in something, and I come back for a 5th year. I mean, why not? And
I guess the only other thing you could do is like they could probably go transfer somewhere and play like D3 or even D2. I think, who was it? Pennington. Kevin Pangos' like brother-in-law, the
Paul
kid
Pennington.
Should have never been on a walk-on the team. He's like 5'7" and not great. He played on the Idaho team, Lewis Clark State.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was playing there this year, and so like that's NAIA. I don't know how the eligibility transfers over there, but like you could go play if you're one of those guys, especially like a Matt Lang. Like
I was gonna say,
like a stud.
You could go be a stud on a D2 school. You could also go be a rotation player on a bottom D1 school. Like Matt Lang could go to a bottom D1 school and play decent minutes. Probably Will Graves as well. But like Matt Lang's looked pretty good this season in the minutes he's played. And I would love to see him go kill it at another. I mean, hell, Matt Lang could probably go do pretty well at a school like Grand Canyon even. Like, he's not going to start, don't get me wrong, but like he could play at a school like that. He could play at a super low level D1, or would love to see him go to a D2 school and be an absolute stud for a year.
I'm just thinking you find a school that has a really good master's program and whatever you want to do. That's why I was kind of thinking D3 probably has better schools than D2. You know, some of the smaller private ones, especially if you're looking to stay on the West Coast and could go play there, and you'd just be you'd be a monster probably. But you know, that's also a lot to be switching schools, and he's got a pretty sweet deal right now anyway. So
I was going to say Graves could. The interesting thing will be, what do they want to? I mean, Graves has got the name to do a lot of things if he has interest in staying in basketball afterwards, right? I mean, he's got the pedigree in his family.
Could just be be a grad assistant somewhere. It's probably what they end up doing.
Exactly.
All right, well, that finishes it up for this episode of the Zag Talk podcast. We will be back probably next week to preview the San Francisco and St. Mary's games to close out the season, and also touch on what goes down on the Santa Clara game on Saturday. So keep an eye out for that. And again, follow us on Twitter. I'll drop all of our handles in the episode comments, and thanks again to Cowan Jenkins for doing our editing for this episode and all of our episodes this year. And with that, go Zags.
And don't forget, if you're looking for more college basketball content outside of just the Zags, there's also the New Bloods podcast, which is being hosted by the same Zagaholic site that we're now hosted on. So shout out to them for hosting us. Go check out Josh, Tuck, and Kyle on their New Bloods podcast as well.
Right. Go Zags.
Go Zags.